The airport was buzzing with the usual noise of rolling suitcases, boarding calls, and impatient passengers waiting to get on their flights. But then, something happened that silenced the entire gate in an instant. An old man, frail but determined, slowly approached the boarding line with his ticket in hand. His clothes were simple, his steps unsteady, yet his eyes carried a weight that no one could quite explain. Just as he was about to board, the airline staff stepped forward and blocked him, insisting he couldn't get on the plane. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Some people whispered, others frowned, wondering why someone so harmless was being stopped. The old man's voice trembled as he tried to explain, but the staff's firm refusal only made the situation more tense. And then, it happened. In that frozen moment, something about him, his words, his presence, shifted the atmosphere. The other passengers, who had been impatient just moments before, now stared in disbelief. Their faces turned pale, their hands shook, and an eerie silence fell across the gate. Nobody expected what came next. And in that moment, everyone realized this flight would not be an ordinary journey. It would be something far more unforgettable. The silence at the gate grew heavier with every passing second. The old man's ticket shook slightly in his hand, but his gaze never wavered. He looked as though he had carried secrets across decades, secrets too heavy for one man to bear. A mother holding her child drew the little one closer, as if sensing something unseen. A businessman lowered his phone, his earlier frustration now replaced with uneasy curiosity. People could feel that this moment was not just about a denied boarding, it was about something far deeper. The airline staff exchanged uncertain glances, their voices quieter now, almost hesitant. The old man's words, though soft, seemed to echo in the minds of those listening. He insisted he had to be on that flight, that lives depended on it. But when pressed for an explanation, he faltered, staring past the crowd as if reliving something long forgotten. Passengers shifted nervously, some whispering that he looked familiar, others wondering if they had seen his face in old newspapers or stories passed down. Yet no one could place him exactly. The tension built as the boarding door remained closed, the air thick with questions. Why was this old man so desperate? And what truth was he carrying that made the entire crowd tremble? Whispers spread quickly through the waiting area, bouncing from one passenger to another until the entire crowd seemed to breathe as one. Some insisted the old man was confused, maybe lost or ill. Others argued that his urgency couldn't be ignored. A young woman seated near the front recalled seeing him arrive hours earlier, sitting quietly, watching each departure with restless eyes, as if waiting for this exact flight. Her words only fueled the growing unease. The airline manager appeared, calm on the surface but clearly unsettled. He asked the old man for identification, yet what the man handed over only deepened the mystery. The paper looked worn, almost too old to be real, with faded letters and a date no one wanted to believe. The staff tried to dismiss it as a mistake, but a retired soldier in the crowd stepped forward, his face paling as he studied the document. He didn't speak, only gave the man a solemn nod, as if recognizing something no one else could. Families clutched their children tighter, travelers debated whether to board, and the tension built like a storm waiting to break. What was on that plane that drew this old man with such desperate determination? And why did it feel as though everyone's fate was tied to his presence? The boarding gate was no longer just a waiting area. It felt like a stage where every eye was locked on the old man. The murmurs grew louder, arguments breaking out between passengers who wanted answers and those who just wanted the flight to move on. Yet no one could bring themselves to step forward. It was as if an invisible weight pressed down on the entire room. The air was thick, almost electric, with a fear no one could name. The old man lifted his head slowly, his voice firm despite the tremble in his hands. He spoke of danger, something about this flight not being safe. His words were vague, yet they carried a conviction that rattled the listeners to their core. Some dismissed it as the ramblings of age, but others felt the truth hiding between his pauses. The retired soldier clenched his jaw, urging the staff to listen, but the officials hesitated, torn between protocol and the unsettling feeling spreading through the crowd. A sudden announcement crackled over the speakers, calling final boarding for the flight. The tension snapped tighter. The old man's face turned pale. His eyes locked on the aircraft outside as though he could already see what was coming. The passengers held their breath. Something was about to happen, and none of them were ready for it. Just as the final boarding call echoed through the terminal, a sharp sound cut across the silence. The old man dropped his ticket, and tucked beneath it was something no one expected. It wasn't another document, but a small photograph, creased and faded from years of being carried close. A child's face stared back from the picture, smiling innocently, yet there was something haunting in the way the old man clutched it to his chest. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he whispered that the child had once boarded a plane, and never returned. The passengers exchanged uneasy glances, their nerves fraying. Was this his family? Was his warning tied to something from the past that was repeating now? The airline staff grew impatient, urging everyone to proceed, but the old man suddenly pointed to a man standing quietly near the boarding gate. Until that moment, no one had noticed him, dressed neatly, holding nothing but a slim briefcase. His expression was calm, almost too calm, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. The crowd fell into a stunned silence, the old man's voice rising with desperation. "He cannot board that plane." The words struck like thunder. Suspicion spread instantly, fear latching onto every heartbeat. Whatever the truth was, it was no longer just about the old man. Something bigger was unfolding, something that threatened everyone waiting at that gate. The room froze as the old man's trembling finger pointed at the stranger with the briefcase. The staff rushed to calm the situation, but before they could speak, the retired soldier stepped forward. His voice steady yet urgent. He demanded the briefcase be checked. The stranger's calm expression faltered for the first time, his grip tightening ever so slightly. The passengers, now pale and restless, pressed back from the gate, their fear rising like a wave. Security officers hurried over, and after a tense struggle, the case was opened. Inside was not a weapon but a set of documents, blueprints, names, dates, that revealed a plan no one had expected. The old man's warnings had been right. The flight was part of something dangerous, and had he not spoken, everyone boarding would have walked blindly into it. Relief and shock flooded the room as passengers realized the danger they had narrowly escaped. But before anyone could thank him, the old man collapsed into a chair, his breath shallow. He looked at the photograph once more, tears glistening in his eyes. "I kept my promise," he whispered. When they turned to ask what he meant, the soldier lifted the photo. The child in the picture wasn't from the past. It was a current passenger, standing quietly in the crowd. The twist left everyone shaken. The old man hadn't just saved strangers. He had saved someone far closer than anyone imagined. The gate was quiet now, the kind of silence that follows a storm. Passengers slowly lowered their bags, their faces softening with the realization of what had just happened. The airline staff, shaken but grateful, offered words of thanks to the old man, though he hardly seemed to hear them. His eyes stayed on the child in the crowd, the same child from the faded photograph. No one knew the full story, but in that look was a lifetime of love, regret, and an unspoken promise finally fulfilled. The stranger with the briefcase was led away, his plan exposed, his calm facade gone. The retired soldier placed a steady hand on the old man's shoulder, as if acknowledging a silent bond between two men who had seen too much yet still stood to protect others. The passengers began to whisper again, but now their voices carried gratitude rather than fear. Parents hugged their children tighter, couples held hands, and strangers looked at one another with new respect. As the old man rose to leave, he turned once more toward the gate. The flight was cancelled, but something greater had taken place that day. Lives were saved, and a powerful reminder echoed in every heart, that sometimes the most ordinary-looking person carries the strength to change everything.